Yep.
For the record, I identify as Afro-Rican.
Fair enough. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is 4 Shots of Kajukenbo, and this is our first ever sober episode. For the first time, we will not be drinking shots, and maybe that's for the better. We're going to be hitting some serious topics today. We're going to talk about some things that might make people angry. Mickey's here. Mixing those things with alcohol might be a bad idea, or a great idea, I'm not sure yet. We are going to be talking about the Hispanic, Black, and Filipino experience through the eyes of martial artists. This is not meant to exclude Caucasians or people of Anglo-Saxon descent. This is just meant to give the microphone to specific people on a specific topic. Now, normally I'd go around and introduce all you guys myself for people who have not seen the show, but I want you guys to introduce yourselves, not only your time in the martial arts, but also your ethnic background. The reason is, I think the way you introduce your cultural heritage will be a reflection of things to come later in the show. I'm John Hoylo, martial arts since 91, Kajukenbo since 99. I'm half Latino and half white. My mom was from El Salvador, and my father's parents were from Poland, and I've always been somewhere in the middle, never really comfortable on either side. Angelo, you're up. Then Eric, then Mickey.
My name is Angelo Ferrer. I've been doing Kajukenbo since I was 18. I'm 38 now. I've been teaching for over 10 years. My background is my parents are both Puerto Rican. My dad was white Puerto Rican. My grandpa was black Puerto Rican, known as Afro-Rican. So my mom was mixed. I'm mixed. If I grow my hair longer than this, I will have an afro when it gets to here. If it goes longer than that, it naturally turns into dreadlocks. So yeah, I identify as Puerto Rican, but also as biracial.
I forgot who was supposed to go next. Was that me?
You are here. Go ahead. Go for it.
Hey, what's up? I'm Eric Coleman, martial artist since 2nd grade, Kajukenbo since I was 10. I'm 47 now, so you do the math. That's probably longer than Mickey's been alive. I identify as blackity black. But I just did my ancestry half. What am I, like 20% European or something like that? So, but no, I don't identify with that too much.
Fair enough.
What's up, everybody? My name is Mickey Lopez. Been in the martial arts for the past 26 years. Under Grandmaster Ron Estella under the Gaylord method. I am Filipino, but I've been called a lot of other things. But last name is Lopez, so I'll let people know there's some Mexican, Spanish in there somewhere. But with that said, I'm happy to be here with all you guys, and let's just get after it.
Let's do that. So I want to get to all you guys, get as many stories as we can from your experience, but I want to jumpstart the show by asking Mickey about the Asian hate crimes that were all over the news at the beginning of the year. I haven't seen any headlines recently. At the beginning of the year, Mickey, you and I were talking about this. I know you had a lot to say about it. And real quick, what does this have to do with martial arts? Anytime someone says, I'm getting bullied, getting harassed, I'm getting mugged, I'm fearing for my life, martial artist is going to tell them, go train, learn how to defend yourself. You can't rely on other people. And there's also the martial arts idea of dealing with conflict without always resorting to violence. But now this was happening on a much wider scale, all based on race. Mickey, what were your thoughts on those Asian hate crimes and what we can do about it as a Filipino man and a fighter in the United States?
Well, when I first started seeing all these things on the Asian hate. And honestly, I just saw something the other day in Oakland again. It's still happening. And I got really upset. Like, I need to jump up and show everyone how to defend themselves. And, everyone needs to train. But you know what? It's growing up, I was bullied. I was called every derogatory name in the book. But now that it's out here in the open where social media and the news are blowing it up, it's just, it's really sad, you know, and I fear for not only the Filipino people, Chinese, Korean, every kind of, you know what, every kind of culture, bro, because honestly, it's just sad. But the simple fact that the elderly are getting assaulted and getting stabbed for no apparent reason, it's sickening. I mean, you know, it's like, I had a conversation with my parents the other day. I said, you know, you got to be careful. Oh no, I'll do what I want. The world is different now. They can't just go out and, you know, they get profiled now. You know, my parents are older now. I never see the day where I think my parents are ever going to get old, but and I'm seeing it now. So it's sad, bro. I wish, you know, there was, you know, like some Avengers to go around and stop this. But in reality, what can I do is, you know, educate whoever wants to listen. And you know, now that I work for the sheriff's office, you know, I'm seeing what they're saying. And you know what? There's not a lot of officers out there. Everyone can't be in one place at the one time. So my biggest thing from this whole Asian hate thing is to be more educated, you know, is to not walk by yourself. But you know what? These elderly folks, and this is our culture, they like to be by themselves. They like to do things without the help of anyone because they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? They like to just stand by themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they're old school like that. I can't change old school. If I tell an old school person like Ron Esteller, hey, Ron, don't do that, he's going to tell me to piss off. You know, hey, you know,
Well, I mean,
but
in all honesty, I would do the same thing at that age, right? If
Right.
when I get there and someone tells me, well, I can't do something because something else is going on, I'm gonna be stubborn as fuck and say, you know, you can fuck off. I'm gonna go do whatever I want.
yeah, you know what, and that's the thing is, you know, when I get to that age, I'm still gonna do what the f I want, you know, but you know, I can't live in fear. We can't live in fear, and I think, you know, like that one lady that fought back, that put that dude in the stretcher. I mean, she got millions, you know, I mean, she fought back though. So can we teach the elderly to fight back? Of course. I mean, but that's,
you I hear what you're saying about fighting back, but you're always going to have a group of people that prey on people that can't. You know, it's not just about Asian hate. It's about weakness, and people perceive that weakness through the elderly, and I guarantee you that's why that dude attacked that lady, because if it and was shocked when she fought back, because if it wasn't a young person, it wasn't like, it was somebody. Usually when you see those type of attacks, they're either like sucker punches or they're like old people. So it wasn't just, you know, the Asian hate. And you know, it's weird to me, kind of on this topic, it's weird to me that, how can I put this, that Asian hate is a thing. It's just incredibly weird that people, like, all of a sudden, because of, you know, this was all based on like the coronavirus thing, right? And based on that people all of a sudden now see Asians as a threat or as something. And what's weirder is that you would imagine that, like, these people that are doing this are like, quote unquote, like Trump supporters, right? Or people that are right wing thinking. So it's the whole thing is kind of strange to me. And what was even more interesting though was the quickness in which they started to pass laws about it. That right there made me go, wow. Like, that there's a weird thing about whiteness, and I don't know if you want to get into this, but I'm gonna talk about it. There's a weird thing about whiteness, and in that your whiteness has to be earned, and and you can look at that through the lens of any culture that came to America after the first group of people weren't white until they earned their whiteness. And so then if you fast forward that, the closest group of people that were of color were Asians that were like almost white adjacent. So like it it wasn't, how can I put this? It wasn't that they were white, but they were, they were non-threatening and all these weird stereotypes that go along with Asians. And then with the invent of this whole Corona thing, all that got wiped away. So that was a weird, like, social experiment almost to see how that happened.
I think a lot of that I especially see with my, I see a lot of my Chinese and Japanese friends back in the States, but also my high school was like largely Filipinos as well. And there was this, is that we do have the image of all of them having parents yelling at them to study their asses off and become a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And I was happy. I had my best friend in elementary school was a Chinese kid who was the exact opposite. He was a terrible student. But I think at the same time we have, I've heard this, and this is up to you guys. I want to see if you guys agree with this, that I've heard, I don't know, is this racially insensitive to say? I've heard Filipinos described as the black people of the Asian community.
I've heard that before.
You've heard that before?
I've heard that before.
If I just want to go real back onto the point that Eric was mentioning about this new trend because of the coronavirus, real quick. I'm going to share my screen. All right, if it's still recording, you're good. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, just to go back on that point real quick. So here's the screen being shared about how this is how it kind of comes up in the media, right? So in the last fight, and a few fights ago between Zhang Weili, the former champ, versus Joanna, I can't pronounce that. That's too many Z's and K's.
Yeah.
Jetter.
Hey, Weili fought this other girl, not Joanna, by the way.
This is a few fights ago.
Okay.
This is a year ago. But at the time, this is when the coronavirus was kicking, and she's Russian, by the way. But as a way to kind of get people pumped up for the fight, for her promotions, she was wearing a mask, kind of promoting the whole idea that her fighter, because of being Chinese, was she was going to beat her because of the coronavirus, and she made some statements.
Yeah, I remember seeing that picture, man.
And she kind of made it like she made it a race thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this just kind of goes along with what Eric's talking about it's not nothing new, right? If you're any of us from our background, this isn't anything new. But what's kind of putting it out in the limelight is the pandemic. That's kind of like spurring that on. But yeah, go ahead back to what you
No, that's good. No, that's exactly the kind of stuff that's coming up.
And you know what's sad, guys, is our kids are growing up in this environment, and it's when my kids see that, hey, why is that old lady getting mugged and she happens to be like some kind of Asian? It's like they're kind of freaking out, So now it's even more magnified. I'm like, no, babe, you can, we live in Santa Ramon, predominantly it's white, but we can't. There's a lot of, we go to the grocery store and this lady followed us around, like my wife around, thinking she was going to steal something with my kids, so.
See, Mickey, that's what I'm talking about though, is like, that's how I grew up. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's weird. It's interesting to see like this dynamic happening. And for one, the backlash, because there was no real backlash as far as, a Mexican kid, a black kid followed in the store. That is the norm. Like that's more often than not. So it's really, that's what I'm saying. It's really interesting to see, not like in a way of, this should happen to you too, but no, it's interesting to see like how for the Asian community, like I said, I think that the Asian community was the most white adjacent community that there is besides white people. And it's really, so like the thought of all of a sudden these people are now like the enemy, or are now less than, is really, it's crazy. Like it's really crazy to me to see this. And like I said, the backlash is very apparent and very sudden, which is a great thing. But then you have to look at other cultures and say, well, why isn't this happening with other cultures? Like, why? Case in point, it's taken 100 years to pass an anti-lynching bill. Like 100 years. You know what I'm saying? And so over the course of a year, the law, there's been anti-Asian hate crime bills passed. You know what I'm saying? And so it's interesting to say that this is still like, it's still, the Asian community is still a protected community, more so than a Mexican community, more so than a Black community, I think, in my opinion. And it's really, like, you are absolutely correct that your daughters should not have to go through this. And they're going to be aware of this. But what's also equally correct is, and taking this back to the fighting and martial arts side of this, is that the thing that scares me the most about police is that I'm going to hurt somebody one day and get killed because I'm defending myself. And on top of that, my son, I could not imagine what I would do to a police officer, I don't care who it is, that put hands on my son for any reason other than to hug him. You know what I'm saying? And so it sucks all the way around, like all the way around. And it really is, it becomes more apparent to you, I think, because of what's happening now.
Now, Eric, quick question for you. I've heard before that basically African American people have a talk with their kid about exactly what you're talking about. Now, all you guys are dads. You guys all got kids, and all your kids are going to face issues because of their race if they haven't already. Miggy, do you have any kind of talk planned for your kids? You mentioned about how they're seeing this stuff already.
You know what? All I can tell them is to tell the teacher and then come talk to me, because I want them to talk. I want them to tell me, so they're not holding it in. You know, I don't want them, because now in this day and age, you can get cyberbullied. You know, my girls, they have an email that they have to do through their Zoom trainings, and they got sent, someone, I don't know, sent Tiffany like an FU, like a really bad message. And I'm like, hey, Dad, it wasn't me. I didn't know this person. But see, if it's not in person, it's on social media. If it's not on social media, it's through your email. So the best thing I can do is listen and give her advice. Say, you know what? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I'm not going to sugarcoat my kid's eyes.
Mm-hmm. You can't sugarcoat it.
I can't.
And
you know what? And Tiffany was like, I have the video. She goes, hey, Dad, what is that? Weed? I was like, yeah, it's true, man. You know, like, hey, why are they mean to my mommy? Because Chrissy gets turned back all the time. And if I was ever there, I would lose my marbles. I would. You know, I'm like, why are you my wife was going to pay for that. Why are you stalking her? And like Eric said, good. Look, guys, just as long as the word hate and prejudice is in the dictionary, it's never going to stop. It's not going to stop. When we're gone, it's not going to stop. When our kids, it's not. So the best thing to do is teach our kids how to be mentally strong and sticks and stones. But if they put their hands on you, that's something different. But we can't always be there for my kids. That's one of my worst fears as a dad now, is having my girl saying someone hurt me. Just like Eric, I don't know what the hell I would do. You know what I'm saying? And you know, again,
hey, I almost went to my kid's school and punched a kid. Like, like it was that serious. Like I was like, who did what? The weird woo? And the teacher, what's funny is the teacher, I told the teacher, and she was like the same thing. She was like, I'll strangle that kid. Man,
now,
it's great.
I want to take a look over some of Eric's experience as well. For those of you at home who don't know, Eric is a Bay Area martial artist, but at one point he went down to New Mexico to train Muay Thai with Grandmaster Melchor Chavez. Now, Chavez is a Kajukenbo Grandmaster and a recognized crew of Muay Thai. And I was interviewing Eric, and Eric, if I can quote you right on this, you were talking about after New Mexico for a while, it was time for you to come back to California, and you're explaining your reasons. And you said something like, reason, and besides, I was like one of 3 black people in the whole state. Now, I was curious, what's that experience like? So, like, one of 3 black people in the whole state, training as a fighter, what was the whole experience? What has it been like for you as a martial artist?
I mean, the reality of it is there, like, outside of the Bay, there's not a lot of black people training that I saw. Even in the Bay, like it's not a new thing to be the only black kid around. if you are in any kind of situation outside the quote unquote norm stuff. So if you're not playing basketball, not stereotype of football or anything like that, it's a lot of times, even in college, like there's been several classes where I was the only black dude. So it wasn't anything new. It's just something that you pick up on. And being like in New Mexico, it's funny because my roommate, who was a fighter also, Jose Ramirez, we went to a restaurant, a grocery store, and I saw one of the 3 black people in the state, and she was buying some food, and I was like, "Are you making gumbo?" And she was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Yeah," and Jose was with me. He was like, "How did you know what she was doing?" I was like, "Oh, we have meetings every other Wednesday that you don't know anything about." So it's nothing new.
Yeah.
But it's something that you become aware of, just only in the terms of like culture. Like you don't necessarily if you're immersed in your culture. And actually, Margarita Chavez and I had this conversation about being a minority majority. And I never heard that until she told me about that. And it was like the idea of you being around, even though you're a minority, you being around a majority of the people in your culture, and that allows you to kind of explore and think of other ideologies, because you always have this base culture. And that was really interesting because we were talking about some of the people in Albuquerque, and again, I don't want to harp on this, but they were Trump supporters. And I was like, do you not know that they don't like you either? Because I don't understand that. And it was interesting the way she explained it. And I was like, that makes sense, because you don't necessarily have the racism and that other people have to deal with, because you're in a majority culture. Like, nobody's going to be racist against you if you're surrounded by 90% Hispanics, right? So and for me, it was the opposite. It was like, okay, a lot of people, you hear this in the Black community a lot, is he set us back 100 years.
Right.
And or something like that. Like, they did that and they just set us back 100 years. And it's because we are viewed as this monolithic community. And I'm not saying I'm special or anything, but I'm nowhere near the same as the person that might be standing next to me or sitting next to me. It's just we have this communal historic history and even this communal culture, but outside of that, there's like a million different things that are different that I might experience and they might not experience. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers your question.
I can't say I lived the same experience, but here in Japan, I think Angelo and I have something similar where we'll be like 98% of people living in Japan are just straight up Japanese, nothing
Right.
else. So like I can say I've had something of a similar experience of finding all the gaijin kind of come together and they hang out together. And then you're walking down the street, you see a random gaijin, like, oh my God, and you start talking, you know exactly what you're going to be doing because you've been living with Japanese people for so long.
And to be
That
honest,
makes sense to me.
This isn't much different for me. Living in Japan or living back in the U.S. was the same. I came from Escondido, California. Escondido, California has a population of about 151,000. And out of the 151,000 people there, my family and I only knew of two other families in Escondido that were Puerto Rican.
So not too many Puerto Ricans.
And $5 says, whenever I met someone, I said I was Puerto Rican, I had to explain what a Puerto Rican was, first of all.
Man, listen, I had a Puerto Rican dude in my high school. I had no idea what a Puerto Rican was. And I was like, I didn't know what a Puerto Rican was until I went to New York one time. And I was
That's
okay.
Yeah, New York is like the capital of Puerto Rico.
Right.
They say it's San Juan, like in the literature and the history books, but really it's New York City. Like that's where the capital.
Right.
And
what's crazy, what's funny is it was a Puerto Rican woman, and I was like, oh, now I get it.
This whole idea of like, they're mostly in New York. So like when I was in Escondido, everyone just thought I was Mexican, and that came with a whole bag of problems because even Mexicans knew I was Puerto Rican, especially if you start speaking Spanish. Like that guy is not Mexican. There's something going on here. And then as far as if they weren't like from a Spanish Latino background, they really had no clue. So I was just used to the idea of always being the only one. Like I'm Puerto Rican. This is gonna take a long explanation, or I might just let it go. Like as I got older, I got sick of having to explain it. I'll explain it to you if we have time. But after a while, here in Japan, man, it got even worse because like everyone sees me as American. You're American, right? Well, what do you think? I had someone ask me the other day, what do you think of the whole Black Lives Matter as an American? And I'm like, it's kind of complicated because I'm biracial. I'm Puerto Rican. They're a Puerto what? And here we go again. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. Dude, you know the whole joke in Japan, man. That is the whole joke in Japan that there are only two countries. There's Japan and Gaikoku. Everything else. That to Japanese people, that is it. That they don't know that New York. First off, they don't realize that California is bigger than Japan. And then you try to explain how far California is from New York, and their mind gets blown. They have no clue.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. Like growing up in Escondido, being the only Puerto Rican, then you compound that by the factors of where you end up. The suburban areas are mostly white. So it gets even more compounded. So really, my experience has always been, if there's some sort of racial stereotype going on, it's going to be whatever stereotype they have of the brownest person. Like in my neighborhood, it was a lot of hate towards Mexicans. So anytime I got pulled over, it was most likely because they thought I was Mexican. And then they would go, and we start from there, right? They'd say, oh, we're looking for a Hispanic gang member, and you fit the description. And that happened to me twice.
Oh, I've always
I
fit the
almost got
description.
shot twice. Yeah. And then that didn't change. Like as I went across the board, like I used to drive over in when I was in my band, we had these tours. So I'd be driving the van and get pulled over again. I got pulled over once leaving a Native American reservation. I didn't even know I was driving through one because it was a cross-country trip. And then I fit the description of some Native American they were looking for. So like, it's always been whatever darkest person in the area stereotype is going to come towards me, and then I'm going to deal. At one point, I was in a community. I didn't even know that there was there was like an Afghan community near me. I had no clue. And I had someone throw like an Afghan slur at me. And I was like, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm just passing through, you know.
Listen, speaking of New Mexico, the 3 or 4 black people, I fit the description in New Mexico. And at the time, I had locks. And I asked the officer, I was like, hey, so you're telling me right now that you're looking for a 6'7" black dude with dreads in New Mexico. That's what you're telling me. That's what you're trying to. And he looked at his partner, looked at him like, I don't know what this is. I was like, okay, whatever it is, I must have done it because I've seen like 5 since I've been here. So, and he was like, well, this guy has tattoos on his forearm. So, you know, like all that stuff, you can't possibly, I mean, it's so ad nauseum that it's like almost comical if it wasn't like life threatening. You know what I mean? And so I was like, you can't possibly tell me that this is true. And so when I hear all this information about like, oh, he was grabbing his gun or oh, he was doing this and that, and I'm like, does that really? I mean, who is doing this? Like, who is grabbing for guns and things like that? And I'm just like, it's so ridiculously comical that it's like you guys learned this in the first day of basic training or something. I don't know, but yeah, I've always fit the description. Like, I don't know how many times I've been stopped and the cop was like, yeah, something happened and you fit the description of blah blah blah, and I'm like, come on, guy, come on.
Now, Angelo, you mentioned a little bit about when you were growing up in Escondido. Eric, I want to ask you really quick about when you were a kid. A lot of Kajukenbo people love to brag about going to the Palama settlement because that's where Kajukenbo started. I kind of like hearing the stories from the Boys and Girls Club because being a student of Sifu Ron and stories of, you know, Adidas imprints on people's foreheads. And
Reebok.
Whose was it? What happened there?
So... yeah, hard to believe. This might be hard to believe, but he's a lot nicer now than he was when I was a kid. And he was a lot more he wasn't mean, but he wasn't like, he would hit you until you like without even any remorse. And I'll tell this story. There was one time, my mom used to come to the class. Like I was, like I said, 10, 11 years old, but I'm big. My brothers, we're all kind of big for our age. And we were sparring one time and, and I got a kick in and kicked him in the face. And everybody stopped. We were like, and the whole class was like, and my mom was sitting there, right? And so he was like, good kick. And so the next time that she wasn't there, and I don't know if you remember, Mickey, you remember the weight set that was in the that big giant weight set that was at the boys club that was in the room?
Was it like a universal machine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like from 1970, so it wasn't going anywhere. It had the old school plates, and it was like solid, right? And so the next class that we sparred in, he was like, Eric, come on. And I swear to you, he kicked me all the way into the weight set where I'm trying to climb in to get away from this dude. And I'm like 11 years old. I'm like, dude, what? I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. So yeah, he's a lot different than what he used to be. And
I know you like to say, who are you and what have you done to my instructor? I've heard that quite a few times.
I joke with him about that all the time. It's like, who are you? Like, where did this person come? You try to get into heaven now or something. Cause this ain't the same dude, like, at all.
Heading back over to Angelo, coming back, your youth, you mentioned what the neighborhood was like, not too many Puerto Ricans around. Now you're training in Japan. Not only are you Puerto Rican, but you are a gaijin. What's that been like for you?
I'm pretty much convinced I'm the only Puerto Rican in Japan. Anybody watching this, I'm going to put out the Puerto Rican bat signal. I'm in Japan. Email me if you are here. And let me know I'm not the only one. But yeah, like I said, it's weird, man. As you said, living in Japan, it's different. The stereotypes are different. The expectations are different. And since I already grew up constantly being stereotyped and dealing with whatever negative stereotypes they had of whoever they thought I was, even when I wasn't, coming to Japan was kind of weird because for the first time in my life, they just figured I'm American. The end. They're like, oh, where are you from? You're American. Oh, I thought you were Brazilian. That's it. Like that's the most I get. I thought you might be Indian. And then as soon as I say I'm American, then whatever preconceptions they have about Americans comes to play. But that's about it. I haven't really. I mean, I guess the tough part is trying to claim I'm Puerto Rican, but I stopped trying to do that. I just gave up on it. Like once in a while, if someone really wants to get to know me, I'll tell them. Obviously, the flag's back there in the background, so people that
Right.
will ask what that flag is, and I'll explain to them real quick. But I know in their head, at the end of the day, they just see me as American. So whatever stereotypes they have towards American. I had some people that thought I might support Trump because they just figured all Americans supported Trump out here. That's how it worked. Like all America, it's your president. So like that was a whole different issue.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Like with you guys and not being Japanese and being in the martial arts, how is it like, how do they view you? Like, do they view you as like appropriating culture or how, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do they view you as do they think of you as like real martial artists, quote unquote, or what is it?
It's a weird thing.
So being in Japan made me realize that what we do most likely should just not be called karate. It's funny how many Kajukenbo guys are like, let's hold on to these karate roots. But I'm going to tell you that the karate debate out here is so deep that even amongst themselves, Japanese people are saying, you're not karate, you're not karate, no, you're not karate, you're not karate. And then they look at what we do. You're definite. Okay, we're not sure if either of the Japanese guys are karate, but we know you're not karate. That's for damn sure. You're not karate. So, like, I could wear the gi, but I literally had a student quit because the mother walked up to me and she said, I talked to my brother and he said that you're teaching fake karate. And I'm like, all right. And who's your brother? He's like, oh, my brother does. He's part of the Japanese, karate federation. He said he's never heard of you or your style. So I'm like, all right, well, okay. So I found for Japan, what's made it really easy to avoid the karate debate is just really stick to it. We're Kajukenbo. I'm Kajukenbo. It's a mixed martial art, and that's it. We wear gi.
Yeah, because karate here is such a generic term,
exactly,
as opposed to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, over here it's tied to a lot of baggage. Like I said, they're still arguing whether it's going to be Shoto-ryu or Kyokushin or Shotokan or the Okinawan style, which is Goju-ryu, right? They're still arguing those four styles, which one's the original karate. And one of them has to do with money. They all joined the Japanese Karate Federation, JKF. I've contacted JKF because I wanted my guys to compete in their tournaments. And what they pretty much told me was they wanted a lot of money and they wanted me to say that I'm part of the JKF. And to be part of the JKF, I had to show them they wanted me to at least learn 2 forms and pay them more money to be a part of their system. So it's all about money, really. That's what I saw. And now the politics is that if you're part of the JKF, you can compete in the Olympics and forms.
I would say if you get out of the politics, they all want money because they're running a business. Because this is it's all a big thing. It's the whole organization, the corporations, like is what it is. But at the same time, doing any kind of karate at all, they don't feel if you join a class, they love to have foreign people in the class. On the social level, it's really weird to talk about race in Japan because once you talk about race, a lot of people talk about racism. And on one hand, the angry racism is basically directed to other Asians, mostly Chinese and Korean people. And then if you're white, black, and Hispanic, you kind of face more of the systemic or microaggression-y stuff.
Mm.
And what part of that microaggression-y stuff is, oh my God, he looks so cool. He's wearing a gi. Oh my God, he's writing in Japanese. You can say a Japanese word. You're amazing. You get a lot more of that, I think. Everyone hates how much when they say, oh my God, you can use chopsticks? It's amazing. You're cool. I see a lot more of that. And as far as us doing karate or jujitsu, judo is really popular here. This is in the school system. They just love to say, oh, I talked to a gaijin today. I can't believe it. I talked to a gaijin. It's great. And then the problem only comes later when you try to like live here forever. You try to be a strict resident. That's when the issue comes. Before that, people are pretty friendly. They're nice.
Hey, E, let me ask you something. Do you think, I don't know, this is why I'm going off on this tangent, but Angelo and I'm Holo, you'll tell me, they have a thing called Demon Day. You know, where they'll have these demons come into your kid's class and they'll try to freak you out. Do you think that would work out here? You know, in the States, if they had Demon Day, well, they're like, no, man, a straight demon comes to your classroom and gets your kid right. So, like, he stays on the right path.
Okay, wait.
What you think about that?
Interrupt. So I'm gonna explain this because Eric looks very, very lost and confused. Didn't see this coming.
Eric,
Okay,
you
so
got
Eric,
man, Demon Day,
Eric,
dog.
They have
Demon Day.
called Oni Soto. It's Demon Day. They tell the kids this story about a bad kid who misbehaved, and he was warned that if he kept misbehaving, the demons were gonna grab him and take him into the mountains. And after they tell this story to all the kids, then they're in this. This happened to me. Like, this was a culture shock for me because they wanted me to come and participate in Demon Day, and I didn't know what it was. So after they told this story to all the kids about how this bad kid was naughty, he didn't eat his breakfast, just the kind of bad things that kids can do. The demons are gonna come and get you, take you to the mountains. After they say this story to the kids are like, oh, that's kind of scary. We're in this giant auditorium. The door is open, and adults dressed up as demons come in and start grabbing kids and pulling them out.
Bro.
And the kids are given beams to throw at the demons to ward them off. But of course it doesn't work. So they're just bouncing them off these adults going after them. And they have these giant bats and kids are screaming. At the end of all, they take 2 kids away as the examples of the 2 kids that would be taken away. And the rest
out here, that's called juvenile hall.
Right.
Scared straight, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, man. Mickey, go ahead.
Oh, no, speaking of which, with the Olympics on the horizon, how's the buzz out there in Japan right now?
Yeah, a lot of people, I think most people agree that it's a stupid idea to do the Olympics, but you really can't say no now because of how much money is poured into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard they're not going to allow anybody to watch or spectators. So they are trying to you don't get that spectator money, and that's what's going to really suck because they thought that they were getting it back. But what's weird to me, and this is kind of off topic, but it's weird to me that people even want the Olympics still because it's always a failing business venture. Like, it's never made money for the city that it's in. So it's always very strange to me that people are like vying for that.
Japan's really big on having that kind of stuff and being able to brag, we had the Olympics. I think Japan has like the most world heritage things. They're like constantly trying to make everything added to the UNESCO list. They've got like hundreds of things labeled. And every month they're like, hey, let's put this shrine on the World Heritage site, and this shrine too, and let's make sushi a World Heritage. So like for Japan, I think they're just going out of the way because it's just a pride thing almost. It's just they are happy to say, we did this, we succeeded, and we won.
Great, now I want sushi.
Yeah.
So you're wondering, how's it going? Here, check this out. This is how it's going. This is the newest article that I saw happening with the Tokyo. One of the members of the Ugandan weightlifting team has gone missing right before his COVID-19 test. Some team members of his ended up being positive for COVID. So I think he kind of freaked out and decided to run away.
Oh, shit.
So he's missing. He left a note
saying, I'm going to try to start a new life out here in Japan, and I'm out. So, yeah, they're looking for him right now.
How can they not find this dude? He definitely fits the description. Who is looking for him? Who is that bad? Who is doing that bad of a job looking for this dude?
Yeah, they're looking for him. They're looking for him. And so far, they haven't found him.
They could be
I
like,
don't know where he's hiding.
There he is. That's nonsense.
So yeah, that's how it's going.
That's how it's going, exactly.
How it's going right now.
Angelo, quick question for you. Regarding your daughter, has she been called a hafu yet?
You know, it's weird because it's like they see me, so they know she's my daughter. So they look at me, but if I'm not there, they don't say anything, right? If I'm not there, they don't say anything. They actually think she's Japanese. She's just so. I think I can, like, they're always looking at her and like, I think I can kind of see a little bit of, she looks a little bit like, her eyes are a little rounder. They'll like mention on her facial features that she might not be fully Japanese, and they're talking about how cool she looks all the time. That's what mostly they're trying to do.
And the reason I bring this up,
Go ahead.
hafu is a term they use in Japan. It comes from the English word half, and they use it to describe people who are half Japanese and half something else. Like, I would not be called hafu. I would just be called foreigner, gaijin, because I'm not part Japanese. But they have this term hafu, then it apparently gets on a lot of people's nerves. That's what I want to ask Andrew. She hasn't faced that. Are you worried about that in the future? I know the whole hafu thing has caused some people to deal with stress. Are you worried about your daughter with that in the future?
Honestly, like, I'm not too worried about it because what's happening is there's not, again, maybe in my neighborhood, I looked at it, there's not that many foreigners out here. So like, they have more of that positive thing where they just kind of, they almost want her to be a foreigner because it's considered like this, like, cool thing to be, I guess. It's like a trend, like, to be a foreigner would be so cool. And everybody always tells my wife when they see her, like, oh, I wish I could marry someone who was a foreigner so I can have kids that are going to have, like, more foreign features. So, like, that's the kind of conversation that it's centralized in. I was more worried for my daughter for when she, like, because of how harsh the educational system can be and how much they expect them to know. That's what I was more worried about. Like, I was more worried about her being expected to understand all the kanji and then blaming her not knowing all the kanji on her not being fully Japanese. That's what I was more worried about.
I've heard that before. I've heard quite a few families in Japan go home. They go to America, they go to Canada or whatever for just specifically for their kids' education. They're worried about that experience for the kid here.
Yeah. Yeah, because I did hear some people that had negative experience. Like my daughter hasn't, but I talked to a few people that were biracial and or bi-ethnic, I guess that would be the term. And they were telling me that growing up they had to go to international school because when they went to a regular Japanese school, one of the stories that my friend told me was that she was in junior high, and every time the junior high school English teacher would be teaching English, she'd teach something and then look at her and be like, is that correct? And like, she's like, I don't know, I'm 13. Like, nobody's asking me if that's correct for her. You're the teacher. So she was, so that was the kind of experience that she said was a lot of pressure for her. Like, it was like, she's only 13. She's just trying to learn English just like everyone else, learn the grammar and whatever else. And the teacher keeps looking to her for the right answer. She's like, I don't know the right answer. Just like I can speak English doesn't mean I know a lot about grammar stuff. So that was kind of the thing I was a little bit worried about for my daughter that I do keep an eye out for. I have a backup plan that if she ends up feeling like she's being singled out because of not being fully Japanese, my backup plan is to put her in online. There's a lot of I got really in touch in Kobe with the multicultural community, like the Hafu, as they say, and they had a Hafu club, and they were all together from different races, but they were all Japanese and half something else. and they all got together and they told me that a lot of them, and I got to meet a lot of them because they came and trained, and they told me that for her, that there's a lot of online programs. Like you can do online high school, online junior high, even through private schools, and you can get your diploma from the U.S. over here. So I don't have to get the U.S. So I'm keeping it as an option. Is it a problem so far? No, it's not a problem so far. Everyone's just been really nice. She's so far. She went to international school for most of her 2 years in preschool. Now for her last year in kindergarten, she's in a regular Japanese school, and they're just really accommodating to the fact that she can speak Japanese, but she's not at the level of the other kids are at yet.
How old is your daughter?
She's 5. She turned 6 in November. So,
I think that I would be surprised that it would be a problem at that age. Like kids at that age are super accepting of anything and everything, and I would imagine that the problem would grow at around 5th or 6th grade. And you know, being that I think most of us taught, if not kids martial arts, but kids in school, they're evil. So
Yeah.
So yeah,
Man, Demon Day.
That's what Demon Day is for, man.
That's what the demons is for. Huh?
All right, so we're almost finished for the day. I want to ask one final question. Usually end the show with some kind of nerdy question, comic book heroes, movies, zombies, things like that. But sticking with the theme, I want to ask you guys, consider the arts, that's movies, books, music, everything. What art would you recommend to people who want to know what it is to live the Hispanic, Black, or Filipino experience? If somebody says, I'm not Filipino, but I want to know what it's like, or I'm not Asian, I want to know what it's like to grow up Asian. Movies, books, anything. What comes to mind that you would want other people to experience so they can get a better understanding of what it's like living outside of their own lives?
Ooh. That's a good
Off
question.
the top of my head, hey, Ip Man. If you want to understand the Chinese culture, I think Ip Man's very cultural, and you know, Donnie Yen does a really good job.
All right. I heard a lot of good things about Ip Man.
What about Best of the Best, bro? How about that old school movie? Come on.
That's the best, and Bloodsport go hand in hand. I don't know how far we can go with that.
Classic.
What could you do? I don't think there's one thing that you can do. And I don't think that like you have to have a well-rounded education. And that could be books from like the autobiography of Malcolm X to you know, I can't even think of any books offhand that I would be like, oh, this 100% tells the story. Like Man-Child in the Promised Land is a book that I would say, you know, art-wise, of course, like musical, like it's weird because you can't get the story from one person. And it's like, again, that whole monolith thing is like, my story is not your story. And if you don't, all I can say is this: once you think about something, think about it in terms of not in your experience, and really relate to what somebody else's experience is, and don't discount their experience from because it is not your experience. So if you go into it like that, then I think that any cultural art is going to provide you with a small window of that experience. But you have to think of it in terms of, this is a reality that is not mine. And so how can I empathize with that reality?
Eric, real quick, learning Muay Thai, did you get a grasp of the culture from Thailand? Or was that, because obviously Chavez wasn't from Thailand, but did you feel the culture? Because you did put on the, I don't know what you call those.
So I can speak to learning Muay Thai and learning Capoeira. Both gave me a window into the experience, and it gave me a reason to go and research more. like just that thing. Like I didn't know what any of that stuff. I didn't know what the white crew and all that stuff and all the stuff. It didn't. I had a more of an appreciation for it, but then for me it was like, okay, what else can I learn about this? So like especially for capoeira, I went and read all kind of capoeira books and looked for like movies and things. So it sparked the interest. And so I don't have a real understanding of what it's like to live in a favela, but I can appreciate the history. And if I never started capoeira, then I wouldn't have, I wouldn't even know what a favela is unless I watched like City of God or something. So it gives you a spark for then that you then can go and do more research on. Because like I said, none of this there's no I don't think be all end all to define what a culture is, because that's almost impossible to do.
They're really. I think there's two things that people want to know what a Puerto Rican is. You should Wikipedia Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican. That's going to give you a really quick overview. If you want to go into deep depth on the history, I would look up the Tainos. There will be a link for that in Wikipedia. Look at Puerto Rican.
The Tainos, yeah.
And then you're going to look at the Tainos, and then you're going to get the full history about how the Tainos nation used to have. They occupied Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, nowadays Haiti. All those islands, those are all the Tainos nation. So during colonization came, all these cultures mixed with Tainos. And then Puerto Ricans genetically, we always said we were the strongest. The Tainos had like their last stand in Cuba. And so a lot of the Tainos tribe, it died out, but Cubans and Puerto Ricans hold the highest percentage of that blood, even though we became mixed with African and specifically Spaniard and some Italian, but mostly Spaniard. Now, that demographic changes when you go to Jamaica and you go to Haiti, but the Tainos are there. Like, that's a part of that. So I really look at the Tainos. That's a really good way to figure out where the history of Puerto Rico is and like why we're so tied to the Tainos. We talk about that, specifically the Boricuan tribe. From there, if you really want to know what Puerto Ricans are doing nowadays, the House of Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican clubs are a great place. They're very welcoming to people that are non-Puerto Rican. In fact, when I finally joined the Puerto Rican club in my area, it was funny because there actually was mostly people from other places. There was a lot of like white folk there, like to figure out what Puerto Ricans were. They were there, and the Puerto Ricans, we called them Soda Rican because we all lived in our club, and we call anyone who wasn't Puerto Rican who married a Puerto Rican. Because Puerto Ricans, so there was a few white folk, there was a few African Americans, there's a few Asians there. And they would all introduce themselves and they'd all say we're Puerto Rican. So they're all very welcoming to people that are not Puerto Rican to join their clubs. So if I were you, even if you're not going to join the Puerto Rican club, just stop by. They'll give you a nice plate of Puerto Rican food, and you can kind of see how we are. And they're very open to have people from other places come in. So wherever you are, look at Puerto Rican and feel free to go on in there and meet some Puerto Ricans. We don't. All
right. All right. Cool. All right, so that is the end of the show today. So thank you guys for coming on. Want to get all of your guys' stories as much as we can. For those of you at home, we hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, share, and comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know your own stories, your own recommendations, books, movies, etc. Stay tuned next time for our next episode when we get Mickey drunk and ask him what he really thinks about politics in the martial arts.
Don't want that.
Until then, stay strong. Stay Kajukenbo strong. Mahalo. Was that the one?
Bro, there was vomit on my bed. Yes, you were there. Because you weren't 21 yet, bro. Yeah, You know, all the grandmaster like, so, hey, Mickey, how was last night? I'm like, bro, Dan, you already know? Word travels fast.
It's
Crazy.
one of those things that you never gonna hear the end of.
Yeah, that's, never mix your drinks, boys. That's all I got to say.